Welcome to The Founder's Mind. This is your host, Adam Muchler. On today's episode, I have Diego, founder of Together International. In this episode, Diego shares his journey as a community builder, advocate, entrepreneur, and founder. Before we get to Diego's episode, a quick note. Tomorrow, Thursday, September 27th at 9 a.m. Eastern, Diego joins me at 1776's DC campus with several other guests to discuss bias and its impacts and how to recruit more allies. If you can't make it in person to the panel, we'll have it streamed live. You can find the link on our website and on social channels. Now, to Diego's story. Diego, welcome to The Founder's Mind.
I'm excited to be here. I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to be here with you, and we're at 1776's DC campus.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a lot of campuses now.
You're right.
And I like to start usually just by asking if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, give the listeners an idea of who you are, what you're up to.
Sure. So my name is Diego, and I am an American citizen by mistake.
Okay.
So my parents were shopping, and my parents are both from Mexico, and they were shopping for baby stuff. And apparently I've always been really stubborn, even before I was born, because I was born 6 months and a half into my mom's pregnancy.
Okay.
So pretty tiny baby, to give you an idea, right? My entire body, like everything, could fit in the palm of the hand of my mom.
Wow.
So pretty small. So that, as a result of that, I have cerebral palsy, which actually we can get into a whole conversation of what language is very problematic.
Uh-huh.
Cerebral palsy manifests in different people in different ways.
Yeah.
For me, it manifests on trouble walking and sort of like just balance and stuff like that. But anyway, so I have cerebral palsy. I grew up in Mexico, and growing up in Mexico with a disability versus growing up in the States with a disability, it's very different experiences. There's not enough. I mean, there's not to say there's enough. There is significantly fewer laws and regulations and structures to support people with disabilities. And so I constantly... In Mexico. I mean, in here too, one could make an argument, right? There's a comparable difference between living with a disability in Mexico and living with a disability here. Mm-hmm. And so I always had to fight against the system. And my parents had to fight against schools that wouldn't let me in because I had a disability. I couldn't use public transportation. One classmate, actually, when I was little, told me, like, my dad doesn't let me play with weird kids, like things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I've always had to sort of overcome challenges. And that is inherently an entrepreneurship mindset, right? Of like overcoming challenges, solving problems. And so by nature, I was entrepreneurial. I've literally fallen down on the floor like thousands of times in my life. Mm-hmm. And so inherently I was entrepreneurial. In high school, I decided to start a student group that was all about teaching students kind of how to talk about disability. And so we would do things like eating without being able to see, or using public transportation in a wheelchair, or communicating without speaking. And that model, those activities were like gateway to start a conversation about disability.
Yeah.
And I would say the model grew very rapidly. I mean, in 4 years, we were in 15 high schools across the country, approximately. 80% of it was corporate funded. We were impacting about 3,000 students nationwide.
This is while you were in high school?
This was while I was in high school, yeah. And, I think that it's still the largest student-led program educating other students about disability. Mm-hmm. It is, I think there are some problems with it now in hindsight. I think there's some serious or significant problems with it. At the same time, I take that experience and I apply it to what I'm doing now. Yeah. And I'm so happy that I did it, and I wouldn't change a thing. I think I'm a much better entrepreneur now because of that. So anyway, needless to say, I mean, that whole experience made for a very compelling admissions essay, and so I decided to go to the U.S. for college. And because I am a U.S. citizen, I have access to, all these resources, especially as a person with a disability. And so I decided to go to the U.S. for college. I went to American University. I ended up being dismissed from the university because I was focusing all my time in building this other company, Together International. Which meant when I was dismissed from the university, I was literally homeless because I was living in the dorms. And so now, I didn't have a place to live. So thank God a friend let me crash on her couch for 2 weeks. And then another friend let me crash on his couch for a couple months until I found a place of my own. But literally, and then at that point, I was literally knocking on people's doors and saying hey, I need a job. Anywhere, I would wake up and I would just walk on the streets and look for signs that said hiring.
Yeah.
And every time I would walk up to the manager or whatever, I could see in their face oh my God, this is a person with a disability. How are we gonna hire them?
Yeah.
It was a very real experience and really kind of frustrating feeling that without knowing anything about me, I was just being judged on the basis of my disability.
Sure.
And so that made me really kind of frustrated. And I said, if people aren't going to hire people with disabilities like me, we have to find a better way. Mm-hmm. And so I had already started working on building this company Together International in college. Once this whole experiences started to happen, I was no, I need to be really serious about this company. And so I decided to focus on this kind of full time. And it took a really long time to figure out exactly kind of what we were doing. But at the same time, my own experiences helped shape that. And so now kind of what we do is, well, first I guess I should talk about what I was doing, what allowed me to sustain the work that I was doing with Together International. At this point, I was at my friend's couch, and I was oh my God, I don't have a job. Oh, and I would go to people's, to try to get jobs, and nobody would give me a job. And so I posted on care.com, and I was
Care.com?
Yeah, care.com, because I'm obviously originally from Mexico, and so I speak Spanish, and so I was I can tutor. I had no idea how to tutor. I had never tutored. But I was you know what? How hard can it be? So basically I would post on care.com, and I would say tutor in Spanish and math, because those were my strongest subjects. Math was my strongest subject. And sometimes I would get calls to tutor chemistry or things like that. And I would be sure, I can teach that. And so I would ask the kids to send me the book beforehand.
Yeah.
So I would read to it really quickly and learn the material and then teach it to other people. And I started making more money that way than most of the people that had graduated with me, were graduating. And so that was fun for a while. Then we got this really big contract. Well, I mean, big contract, $10,000. Yeah. And when you are struggling, for me, $10,000 was wow, I made it.
No, I mean, I had a similar experience. Actually, I took classes at AU for a little bit. It's where I met my now wife. And when I was at AU, I got a contract to make a commercial film for another university, and it was $5,000. And I was why am I going to school for film when someone's paying me $5,000 to make a 2-minute video?
Right.
It was just this funny frame of mind at that point.
Right. No, it is because it starts validating what you're doing. So we got this $10,000 contract, and I was oh my God, we made it, I'm rich. Yeah. So I stopped tutoring. And at this point, I think my experience, I think we need to talk about something that's really real. being an entrepreneur is really hard. And you being an entrepreneur, not just being an entrepreneur, but having a disability also, is really, really hard. And so I think that at that point, I fell into, I don't know if depression is the right word, but like sort of this like everybody's judging me all the time. I think primarily because of the basis of my disability. Because imagine, like, you grow up with people literally judging you all day, all the time. And just because you have a disability. And so, you know, I think we didn't perform the contract the way that we should have. Now, in hindsight. So there was no way we were going to get a renewal. And so I was like, shit. Like, this was kind of like a one-time thing. And now what do we do? And so at that point, I needed to make some money when the $10,000 they were gonna run out. And so at that point, I had gotten a new apartment that was much bigger than I was expecting. It's a one bedroom. It's still the apartment that I live today.
Okay.
But it's a one bedroom that is as big as a 2-bedroom. And so at that point, I was like, what can I do to make some money? And so I started posting on Airbnb. And
when is this chronologically, time-wise?
I have to go back and see.
Yeah, no, just curious.
Recently-ish.
Yeah.
So 2014. So I posted on Airbnb, and I started to get lots of people interested. To the point where I first had only one person, right? Oh, and I was living with the roommate. So it was me, the roommate, plus Airbnb. And I started to see that, like, that was really good. Like, I got to meet people from different parts of the world and blah, blah, blah. So I went from one person on Airbnb to, at one point, I was living with 7 other people.
In a one-bedroom apartment?
In a one-bedroom apartment. In a one-bedroom apartment. It was an incredible experience. Like, we had to have a schedule for people to use the bathroom because it's only one bathroom. We had to have a schedule to so that people could use the bathroom.
So you were making some money.
It was an amazing experience. Yeah, I was making some money. And then I had to figure out also, like, because people were not happy, you know, living with 7 other people. And so I found this guy that made homemade jam.
Homemade jam?
Homemade jam.
Yeah.
And so every time a guest would leave, I would give them homemade jam. And so that made them really happy. Like, made them, like, love the experience. And I was also very intentional about listening to their stories. And, like, kind of, I became sort of like their, not therapist, but I would listen because they were living with 7 other people. So I had to make a value add, right? Of, like, you're living with other people. At the same time, this is going to be an amazing experience. And so that was a really good experience because it showed me how to kind of work with other people and how to, even in a situation where they're clearly not comfortable, make them comfortable. So I loved it. That was probably one of the most fun experiences. I did it for about a year and a half.
A year and a half?
Yeah, it was crazy. Then I got an eviction notice, or a notice, like, if I didn't stop, I was gonna get evicted. But so I've been through some pretty cool experiences, some pretty hard experiences at the same time, and so all this to say, like, my life has been extremely entrepreneurial, and I think people with disabilities are inherently entrepreneurial. From the moment we wake up, we have to figure out how to solve problems, and we have to be creative. And so now what I do with Together International is basically, how do we take the innate entrepreneurship skills of people with disabilities and harness those skills to help people with disabilities achieve whatever goals they want to achieve.
Yeah.
That's on one hand. And then on the other hand is we educate companies on how to think about disability as an asset for business performance.
Yeah. Where's your organization now? Like, what's going on at this point?
I mean, at this point, it's incredible the growth we've had. So we have a meetup of 118 entrepreneurs with disabilities. Not all 118, come to our meetup.
Yeah.
But that's like a network of entrepreneurs that we are in touch with and that we serve. So that's great. I think for a lot of non-for-profit entrepreneurs, it's really difficult to difficult to manage and to understand boards, because as a non-for-profit entrepreneur, you were beholden to like a board of directors. And so I did two boards before this one. I failed many times. And now our board is like solid and strong, and like we all like each other, and we all get, and we all like complement each other. And for a non-for-profit organization, having a strong board is critical, because it's the basis of the organization. So that makes me really proud. Right now, we also finished the contract with the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank.
Okay.
And as opposed to the other contract, this one, like, we outperform in every single metric and expectation. And so it's clear that we're on the right path, that we're growing as an organization. There's a lot of challenges. At the same time, it's clear to me that we are in a very strong place to overcome those challenges.
Yeah. I'm always curious, what's sort of the structure or size of the organization? Is it you? Do you have other consultants?
Yeah.
I know it's a nonprofit.
Yeah, so it's a non-for-profit startup. And I would say for any entrepreneur, but I think specifically for non-for-profit startups, my biggest asset is the network of people that I know. And so I use Trello. I don't know if you're familiar with Trello.
Yeah.
And so on Trello, I have a list that says network. And I have like a list of probably around 50 to 60 people that I contact on a regular basis and that I ask for advice and all that. And I'm very systematic against the, adjustment disorder. I'm very systematic about it. And so that didn't answer your question, but that's one of the biggest tools that I use, like, to succeed as an organization.
Sure.
In terms of how big the organization is, so we are in touch with and we serve entrepreneurs with disabilities on a regular basis. We serve about 20 to 15 entrepreneurs with disabilities that we support constantly.
Sure.
We have a network of 118 entrepreneurs with disabilities. And then, so that's kind of on the people who we serve side.
Got it.
And then on the infrastructure of the organization, we have a board of directors of 4 people. We have a leadership team, an all-volunteer leadership team that runs the meetup. Is a group of 5 people, I believe. We all show up at 8 in the morning on Tuesday, which I thought was pretty impressive. Like, to get a bunch of volunteers to show up at 8 in the morning on Tuesday. Oh, and then the other funny story is, like, I think it was last week or the week before, they called in and they said, "Oh, I'm sick. I'm not going to make it to work, but I still want to call in to the meeting." So when you know that people aren't going to work, but they're still coming to your meeting, you know you're onto something really cool. So we have a leadership team of 5 people, a board of directors of 4. So that's how big in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah. No, I'm just curious when you're talking about, like working on contracts and stuff like that, if it's...
Oh, yeah. And when when we have contracts, I contract out.
Yeah.
So every contract that we have, I contract an assistant or somebody else to help me.
No, absolutely. What's one of the more impactful pieces of advice you've received as a founder?
I think I don't really know how to answer the question, and the reason is because I receive extremely valuable advice every day, and I take it as really valuable advice. I listen from you, I listen from the people who we serve, I listen from my board, I am a very good listener. And so I can't say like this single piece of advice.
Yeah.
I guess if I could sum it in one piece of advice, would be listen, because listening is the greatest skill I think an entrepreneur can have.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you had known earlier?
That I'm really, really, really smart and that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Can you share a founder you admire and why?
Oh, yeah, of course. Nancy Lublin. She is the founder of Dress for Success. She's the founder of... Well, she's not the founder, but she was CEO for a long time of DoSomething.org and turned it into like the best youth organization out there. And she's now the founder of Crisis Text Line. And why is because I think she is like a fearless non-for-profit entrepreneur, and she doesn't think about she's a genius in thinking about non-for-profits as businesses.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's able to run three of the most successful non-for-profits in the country at age 46 or 47, like, mind-blowing.
I love that it was an instant response for you with that. Some people think about it. Some people you might have more, but sometimes there's a question.
Right.
And you was just like, boom, Nancy. Right. What's something that you learned recently that blew your mind?
It goes back to the first question. I mean, I learn every day. Yeah. So I can't pinpoint like one thing.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be the most mind-blowing, but a thing.
A thing that I learned recently, I mean, just yesterday, when I was telling you the story of professional versus social.
Yeah.
And how the curse of the entrepreneur is that there's no distinction.
Yeah.
Between the social and the professional. I think that is a good thing. Oh, I will tell you this. I think that the other thing that I found really important is how valuable your word is to people. Like when you say as an entrepreneur or anyone, you're going to do something. If you don't do it, it has like massive implications. Even if you think like it's a small thing, it has massive implications. So...
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's something that comes up in my work and just in the way I think about things also is that everything starts with, some sort of commitment.
Right.
Whether it's a commitment to yourself internally and privately,
right.
Whether it's a commitment externally to someone else. And that commitment is the beginning of something that becomes real.
Right.
And there's this term, language is generative, which I love, or a phrase. It starts with that language.
Right. Yeah, and I think... when you make a commitment, especially to somebody else, because with you, you can talk to yourself and be like, hey, we should have done this or that. But when you make a commitment to somebody else and you don't follow through, your reputation is on the line.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like if you say, I will call you at this time.
Yeah.
And you don't call at that time, it might seem like a really small thing, but it says something about your ability to come through.
Yeah.
I take that extremely seriously, and it took me a really long time to figure out.
Yeah, this is echoing a conversation I was having with someone yesterday about the details.
Right.
Like paying attention to the details and being consistent. Right. And the people that we know about in society that are the most successful, and oftentimes you can think of athletes, they're great examples of mastering a skill set and it's put on display.
Right.
Right? It's the athletes that pay attention to the details of their game.
Right.
That even when they reach the, metaphorical mountaintop, quote unquote, they're still trying to be better. Like Steph Curry from the Golden State Warriors beats his own records.
Right.
And he's been doing it for several years now.
Right.
He'll set a record and then maybe a year or two later he'll come back and beat that record. Because he's looking at these details and he's committed to that.
Right.
Which I find fascinating.
I agree. I think we shouldn't, sometimes I think work and life can push you to not think about the details.
Yeah.
And I think we should always think about the details because the details is what makes the bigger picture.
Yeah, no, that's something that it sounds like you and I could talk about for a
Yeah.
while. What's one thing, not the thing, what's one thing that the world is missing right now?
What's one thing the world is missing right now? I mean, I think a genuine understanding of disability as an asset to performance.
Yeah. I love it. That was like very polished.
Yeah.
Can you mentioned it earlier, but can you kind of dig into that just a little bit? A genuine understanding of disability as an asset.
You're right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody with a disability has to figure out problems all the time. And so thinking about that as a business opportunity, I think is what the world is missing, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me give you an example. So we had this woman who came to us and said, hey, like, I'm really struggling to get this government agency to give me all, to solve this problem that I have. And it was like a serious problem that she was facing. And we were all kind of like struck by what she was saying. And then 2 weeks later, she comes and she's like, I didn't just get the government agency to solve my problem. I got them to give me 6 months of what they had promised they were going to give me.
Yeah.
Not just what I was looking for, but 6 months back. That is amazing. Like, to get a government agency to not just give you what you want, but to give you 6 months of what you wanted originally, like, that's incredible. That is a business skill.
Yeah.
Like, being able to get to the highest level of a government agency and solve your problem is incredible. So we again, it goes back to the question. We think about these things as like, oh, that's nice. No, it's not nice. It's like amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah. No, I think that I try not to say I agree too many times, but I say I agree a lot because it's true. There's sometimes we take things for granted when they happen, and sometimes we say it's nice, like you said.
Right.
But it's legitimately important to also acknowledge when something is in fact incredible or, extends beyond expectation.
Yeah.
Or, in spite of or in the face of, different roadblocks,
right?
Or whatever they are for an individual. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
This was really great.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, this is... I mean, I learned a lot. I'm sure that listeners will pick something up. Something I always like to ask at the end is, what's a good way for people to follow you, to follow your company, to follow the work you're doing, learn a little more?
Yeah, so, I mean, my name is Diego Mariscal, so you can look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, all that. And then Together International. The caveat there is that Together is spelled with the number 2 instead of a T-O.
Okay.
So, Together International, and you can find out more. Our meetup is Disability Startup Network, so feel free to join, especially those who are entrepreneurs with disabilities. And I'm excited to see how this turns out.
Cool. Thanks for joining me on The Founder's Mind.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back tomorrow morning for a tangent episode with Diego, where he opens up about getting the personal support you need to thrive as a founder. Also, don't forget to check for the live stream of our panel tomorrow, September 27th at 9 a.m. Eastern, on our social channels and website. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at The Founder's Mind. If you like what you're hearing on the show, take a moment to rate and review, and a little bonus, if you leave your social handle in the review, I'll be sure to give you a shout out on the Founder's Mind social channels. Until next time, take care.
In the world, going through all of this insanity and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn. What you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark, founder's mind is what you see. Founder's mind is what you see.